Shin Lamed Zayin. Now we're coming to the whole. He set up the mechanism here. He said Yosef has something which is called the Gevia Kesef, which is, he said, the joy and the ta'anug, the pleasure that comes down because of his ability to meditate on Hashem. So he has Isbonanus, meditation, and he is able, thanks to that, to create a vessel here below, and that vessel draws down the infinite light from above. So what is Yosef doing? He's saying, I want to give this to Binyamin. Okay? And we already know what Binyamin stands for. He stands for the very last of the spirit that Jacob put into Rachel, Jacob put into Rachel when he wed her. And that comes out with the last child. Okay? So today we're going to see, hopefully, I think we'll see it today, what this all means. So that's the Kabbalistic mechanism that's being described. Now we have to understand, why did he give it to Binyamin? What's so special about it? The Eve Shali Galot, read the top of the page. And normally, this type of light that comes down because of Joseph's ability to meditate on God doesn't come down. It can't be revealed. When we talk about revelation and concealment. רצה יוסף, because of this, רצה יוסף להשפיל אור זה של הגביע באמתחת בנימין, להיות נלקח משורשו. So Yosef wanted to give this ability to Binyamin. How did he do it? He placed it, without Binyamin knowing even, he placed it into his pack. So he's giving him the silver goblet. What is he giving him? He's giving him the ability, or at least the result of being able to meditate on Hashem. So, you follow?
Yeah, why did you just give it to him?
We'll see.
So good.
We'll see what. וכנראה בחוש שאהבה בתענוגים שיש לצדיק גמור, יכול להיות שגם בבינונים תהיה אהבה עם השמחה והתענוג, לפי ערכו, אך אינה בשלמותה כמו שהיא במקורה אמיתי, ודי למבין. So now he starts spilling the beans. He says, what I mean to say is that we know that the difference between a tzaddik and a Beinoni is not just that what it says in the Tanya. In the Tanya, the whole focus is on their fight with their evil inclination. So when it comes to the evil inclination, the difference between a tzaddik gamur especially, and a Beinoni is that the tzaddik gamur has no evil inclination. He's killed it. And so he's free from it. And the Beinoni, his whole life is spent battling against it. And he explains in the Tanya that Hashem loves both. These are both types of avoda that Hashem loves. These are both types of service of Hashem. He gives all the mishalim for it, all the different parables for it. But now he's talking about something else. No. He's saying that Binyamin is tzaddik tachton.
Binyamin went into Gan Eden alive. Never did any sin.
We're not talking about Binyamin the person. We're talking about Binyamin the concept. Again, that's how you think symbolically. It doesn't have to fit all the other midrashim. It's a midrash that says that Binyamin was a tzaddik and that he went into Gan Eden without any sins. That's a midrash. One midrash doesn't have to fit with the other. Here we're talking about the symbology behind giving the silver goblet and putting it and hiding it into Binyamin's pack. So here Binyamin represents the Beinoni. And it's interesting because why is he the Beinoni here? Because he's stuck in between Yosef and Yehuda. That's why he's a Beinoni. Beinoni means somebody who's in between, right? He's in between the two of them. Now he's saying, we know that in spite of the fact that the Beinoni is stuck his whole life he's busy fighting his evil inclination, nonetheless we have seen that from time to time he can receive the love and the joy that comes from hashpala, from meditation. Even though he says it's lefir kol. It's not the same thing exactly as what the tzaddik will have. but he has some element, he has some aspect of this revealed in his life. Because even a Beinoni gets some nachas from time to time from his learning Chassidus, right? וזהו מסיבת ההשפלה שהושפל מעבר הבא שבתענוגים שבצדיקים גם למטה מטה בבינונים. And now he sounds like a Polish Rebbe. And he says the reason that the Beinoni has this is because when the tzaddik, when the Rebbe, he meditates, so some of what he receives from above, thanks to his contemplation, spills over to the Beinoni that are connected to him. Yeah? We'll see how it spills over. V'omnam, nafla be'ofen shelo yargishena Beinoni. It has to be in such a way that the Beinoni doesn't know what the source is. He doesn't know where it came from. He can't tell that he has it. She'im yargishena yipol ma'avodato l'yiteher. Because if he thinks that it's more than something sporadic, from time to time it just happens, then what will he think? He'll think that he's already reached the level of the tzaddik. Again, this is not the Tanya's Beinoni. This is a new definition of a Beinoni. A Beinoni is someone whose revelation of godliness in his life depends on his Rebbe. And this is very Polish Chassidus. This is not the way that Chabad usually thinks. Even though you see that it's written here. We'll say that this is against the klal that the Alter Rebbe was not willing to give up on, which is avodah b'koach atzmo. That I have to work myself for what I receive. Here he says there is such a thing that the tzaddik, in hiding, without the Beinoni's knowledge, puts in his pack a silver goblet. He gives him the benefit of the service that he himself has, that he himself does. אבל הצדיק גמור, אף בהרגשתו אותה בגילוי לא ייפול, אדרבה יוסיף כוח. And that's the difference between a Beinoni and a tzaddik. That the tzaddik, even though he knows that what I'm receiving now is in merit of my service, it doesn't cause him to have hubris. It doesn't cause him to have pride.
What?
Hubris. Self-involvement. He doesn't see it as, he doesn't become prideful. Because if you become prideful, you lose it.
There's no word prideful.
Okay.
It doesn't become proud.
He becomes proud. He doesn't become proud. The moment you become proud, you lose all of it. That's why he says it. When he gives it to the tzaddik, when the tzaddik gives it to the Beinoni, to the chassid, to the regular person, he can't let the regular person know that he has it now, because he'll become proud. וזהו שהצניע יוסף שהוא האור הגנוז, שיהיה נמצא גם באמתחת בנימין צדיק תחתון, רק באופן שגם בנימין לא ידע ממנו, ודאי לא מבין. So that's why Yosef had to conceal it, so that even Binyamin could not know. Now he says this clearly. You know, in Netanya, when you read it, it's hard to understand what exactly is the difference between a tzaddik tachton and the Beinoni. Because it would seem that the definition of a real tzaddik is only the tzaddik gomer, the higher tzaddik, tzaddik elyon. Because only the higher tzaddik has a state in which he's not battling his evil inclination at all. But we know that the tzaddik tachton, and Rabbi El used to talk about this, because it's not so clear in my opinion. It's not a done deal. Nobody understands it 100%. From this you get a new idea about it. But the lower tzaddik, the non-perfect tzaddik, still has a yetzer hara. He says it very clearly in the first chapter, the second, the third chapter, fourth chapter. He says it. So how's it different? So the way that I heard the Yoel Khan explain it, sort of, is that he said part of it. Didn't say I had to complete the second half. He said that the tzaddik gamor, the consummate tzaddik, he doesn't even understand why someone would want to do an avera. You can't even understand the rationale behind it. Meaning, for him to eat something non-kosher, okay, it's like eating pebbles. Why in the world would a human being eat pebbles? You never do it. So that's what it looks like to him. So if he is presented, he's given some dish, and the dish is not kosher. And the other people don't even know that it's not kosher because they made a mistake in the kitchen. They did this, they did that. Who knows? He'll look at it, and all he'll see is pebbles. I don't want to eat pebbles. So that's what he said about the tzaddik gomer. The corollary of that is that the tzaddik she'eno gamur, the lower tzaddik, is like the Beinoni. He understands the svara. Meaning, when he looks at this dish, he sees something tasty. He sees something you can eat. But something inside him tells him, I don't want to eat it. Like, for instance, that's the famous story about the Alter Rebbe once. That he tried 3 times to he tried to grab a melafifon or something, I don't remember what. He tried to grab something with his fork. And 3 times it fell. So after 2 times he says it doesn't want to be, it doesn't want to be, it doesn't want to become part of me. And later it was found that there was a problem with it. Some kind of problem with the food. So it's from a side reason. It's not that he sees it, that this is something that's not edible. It's edible, but there's like, something's not right here. You can't tell right away.
But
In that
Alter Rebbe was a perfect setting, no?
Not all the time. So, the Beinoni is not very different from that, because Shmuel Munkas was definitely a Beinoni. So he even could tell that some chont, or whatever it was treif. How could he tell? The chont didn't fight him, didn't run away from him. But he could tell from the way the other people acted. So it's not pebbles, it's very tasty, everybody wants it. But you can tell by the overzealousness that other people have for it, it's not normal. People don't normally want food like this. With such an appetite. Something weird about it. So you could tell there was something wrong about it. He didn't let anybody eat from it, and he saved them from treif. So in that sense, the tzaddik, the tachton, is very similar to the Beinoni. And that's what he's saying here. That the tzaddik tachton could be that he needs to receive, like the Beinoni also. Meaning, it could be that these categories are closer than we usually think. And what he's saying here here he's using them interchangeably. He's saying the Beinoni is the tzaddik tachton. This is very clear here. You can't make the mistake. He's mamish saying this. I'm saying even in the Tanya, there's some proximity between these categories of the lower tzaddik and the intermediate, that somehow they're closer. So that explains why he had to conceal it, why he couldn't give it to him directly. He could have finished the seuda, the feast in his home. And he said, I have a gift for Binyamin, for willing to come down, I don't know, whatever, and he could have given him the silver goblet. So what was the reason that afterwards he said they stole it, and he sent his servants to go find them, and they searched through their packs, and then they found the silver goblet in Binyamin's, because what was the purpose of that? We know that according to the story, the purpose was to get Binyamin to come back to him. Because Yehuda said, the one who you find the silver goblet in his belongings, he'll be your slave. And it turns out it was Binyamin. And they all, by the way, suspected him. Why? Because they knew that Rachel, his mother, had taken her father's idols also. So why did his mother take the idols? Because she didn't want her father to be an idolater. Those were the things that kept him. He thought that all his fortune in the world, all his ability to act in the world, was because of some idol. She wanted him to get free of it. And then he would see he doesn't need it. Maybe he'll do tshuva and he'll understand that there's God in the world. He doesn't need the idols. That's a very noble idea. What was the reasoning here? Same thing. Binyamin had seen that Yosef thinks that all his knowledge comes from all his ability to have foresight and this and that is from the silver goblet. Because he held up the silver goblet and he says, I'll show you that when I look at this goblet, that's how I know who's older than who. And so Binyamin probably had the same type of thinking. If I get rid of the silver goblet, maybe Yosef, who he thought was a goy, he was not a Jew even, maybe he'll see that his insight is because Hashem gave him insight, not because of some foolish silver goblet. So the reason why Yosef did all this, because he wanted to get Binyamin, he wanted to bring Binyamin to him, meaning he doesn't want Binyamin to stay a Beinoni. By the way, I forgot about this. The etymology of the word Binyamin is Beinoni. I forgot about that. So he doesn't want him to stay a Beinoni, an intermediate forever. He wants to lift him up to the level of a tzaddik. He says that's really the purpose of Chabad Chassidus. That like what the Rebbe said at the end, every one of you has to be a Rebbe. Right? That was the last mimer that the Rebbe passed out, V'ata Tetzaveh. And in it he writes, in a footnote, that the conclusion, the Paul Yoitze of this whole thing is that every one of my Chassidim has to become a Rebbe. And so you definitely succeeded with the Shulchan. We see that every Shaliach today is a Rebbe. אך העניין העלילה שלי לחלקם, כי על ידי האהבה עם השמחה שתימצא בבינונים כנ"ל, יוכלו בעת ההיא להיות במדרגות הצדיק גמור ממש, אף שהם הרבה למטה. It says, by giving him the silver goblet can be the reason, even though he doesn't even know that he has it. It can be the reason to lift him up to become like a tzaddik gomer, like a consummate tzaddik. How is it possible? Because we said the whole reason that he has it is because the tzaddik gave it to him. It's not avodah b'koach atzmo, really. It's not really that he did this himself. It's not that he sat for hours and meditated on Hashem and contemplated Hashem, learned Chassidus, and that until finally he had this, what we call ahava b'tanugim, this love of and pleasure of God that is all-encompassing, and we've defined it many times that it means that I receive it as a gift from above, meaning I can't lose it either. So how will this work? והטעם הוא כנ"ל, שעל ידי השמחה גורם השפלת העליון לתחתון. He says a chiddush here. At least for me it's a chiddush. I usually thought, we talked about this yesterday and on Friday and on Thursday we talked about this, that there's a whole sefer, this whole book from Rabbi Isaac of Homel called Ma'amar Shiflut ve'Simcha. The mimer of shiftlus, lowliness, and joy, simcha. And there he explains this whole connection between the two. That we said very shortly is that when you have lowliness, you're creating a vessel in yourself for the infinite light to come down into. Right? When your lowliness is like digging a mine inside yourself. It's creating an engraved seal. And when the engraved seal is ready, then the embossed seal comes down. Hashem comes down. But we said that's like the relationship between a woman and a man also. That she has an opening and he has a protrusion, and that also happens. The same thing happens, by the way, with the earth and seed that you sow into it. The same idea. When you first plow the land and you create an opening, then when you put the seed in, it goes in. And then it can sprout and give you produce. So it says the same thing is true here. But here he reverses it and he says, it's not only that, it's also the other way around. When you experience tremendous joy, but not the joy that just comes from, how should I say, when somebody smiled at you. It's a real joy. He says that creates an engraving inside your heart. And the engraving is a feeling of loneliness. Why do I deserve this? And how did I come about this tremendous joy that I'm now experiencing? It's an incredible what he's saying here. It's saying that the vessel is sometimes created the other way around. It's not that you create the vessel and then the light comes down. Rather, the light first comes down, and then you create the vessel because of the light. And there's two ways. This is on Shabbos. I was learning a mimer from the Rebbe Rayatz, and amazingly, I don't know how it happened. It was exactly about this topic. How should you see it? Should you see it as the vessels were created because the lights were thickened, or did the light thicken because the vessels were created? There's two ways of seeing it. And he says both are true. He says the chiddush of the world of rectification is that the light thickens, and because it thickens, vessels are created. But there's also another option. Sometimes there's vessels first. There's a willingness for some. You have somebody who feels lowly, and that itself draws the light down. And that so it's almost like the world here existed before the light came down. What's that? What would that be like? It's the same thing as like thinking when you think about an old reel film, right? So real REE. So you have little pictures. When it's all rolled up, you can't see the movie. But when you pull it apart and you shine light through each picture, so suddenly there's a picture there. So that's what it means that the vessels exist before the light.
But Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to build the vessels and then build the ark, and B'Tzalel said, no, first you got to build the ark and only then you can put the vessels in.
No, you mean the other way around. Moshe Rabbeinu wanted first to build the ark, and then the tabernacle. And B'Tzalel said, no, first you build the tabernacle, then you bring the vessels into it. But there the vessels would be like the light, even though they're called vessels, because the thing that's containing them, the real vessel, the big vessel, is the tabernacle. And we see that was the order that Hashem wanted. That first you build the world, and then the light comes in, because we see that once they finished building everything, then Hashem started talking to him from in between the kerubim. It's a very... So it said the B'Tzalel, he understands how this works. That's why he's B'Tzalel. He's B'Tzelel. He's in the shadow of godliness. In the shadow, you see that what you first have to do is you build the vessel. And again, it's not that it's this or that. It could be that certain things you first have to build the vessel and then the light comes. It could be other things, like he's saying here, I'll give you the light and it will build vessels in you. So when we're learning Chassidus, one could say, it's a cheat sheet, right? Because here I have all the contemplation that the Alter Rebbe contemplated, and now I'm reading it. What's my connection to it? I don't understand these things. Well, I don't understand them because I didn't develop it myself. If I would have developed this myself, right, I wouldn't have been learning Chassidus, then the light that would come down would be far less, but it would be mine. I would understand what it is.
And you too would be a Rebbe.
No, but I wouldn't know anything, because my ability to develop vessels like his is non-existent. I can't contemplate the way he contemplates. I don't have his mind. I don't have his clinging, his craving for godliness. I can't spend hours upon hours. So I read it. I read his conclusions. So what's his conclusions going to do for me? He says, that's why you need to learn Chassidus. Because I'm telling you that if you get anything from this light, it will build vessels inside of you. It will create the vessel. And so it's the light creating the vessel. That's what he's saying. That the simcha gorem hashpalat ha'elyon ha'tachton. It causes. So even though it looks like Binyamin is coming to him, he's drawing himself to Binyamin. Yosef is finding a way to bring himself into Binyamin. That's the whole point of this mimer. That the Rebbe, what he wants to do is he wants to project his light into the chassid. So he says, how can I do that? I have to give you a silver goblet without you knowing it. What's a silver goblet without you knowing it? You start learning a mimer. And you don't know what's in the mimer. You can't even understand most of it. He says, don't worry. The mimer, even though you think you don't understand it, it's already affecting you. It's already bringing some kind of light into you. And slowly but surely, it's building the vessels that you need. But all these vessels I'm giving you in order to build you up to join me where I am. And by the way, I looked for where is there a mimer like this. It's also in Tafkuf Samach Bet. Meaning he said it in 1801 also. We haven't had a chance to learn that mimer. Now he says, here we have an example from the Gemara that something like this happened. What does it say in the Gemara? In Masechet Sukkah it says that Hillel used to come to Simchas Beis HaShoyevim. He used to come to the joy of Sukkos in the temple. And there, Sha'av mikad chokhmah b'simchat bet HaShoyevim. It says that he was able to take from the jug of wisdom in the Simchas Beis HaShoyevim. What does that mean? How do we know that happened? So that's a different topic. But it's based on the words that he says. And he said there, Hillel the elder used to say, Im ani kan akol kan, v'im en ani kan, mi kan. Right? So usually when you read that in the Gemara, in Sukkah, so it's very hard. I mean, it's Hillel, so he's got to be meek. And he's probably humble. But it's a very strange saying. He says, if I'm here, everything is here. And if I'm not here, nothing. Who is here? Nobody's here. The guy who's so humble is saying, if I'm here, everything is here. So what is he talking about? He says like this. כי אם אין אני תופס מקום מפני הביטול שמצד החוכמה, כמו כן על דרך זה תעלה שמחת הביטול עד רום המעלות דכולה קמי כלו. He says like this. אם אני כאן הכל כאן, if I am here, what's I? Okay? So Rashi there says, he's talking about the Shekhinah. How did the Shekhinah get involved? It's because you can't understand the I here as I pointing at myself and saying I'm so important. You have to understand that the I here is talking about the higher I, the higher self. How did I come to my higher self? Because I have self-nullification. And that's a very important thing, that when we do bittul doesn't mean not having an identity. On the contrary, it means having a higher identity. And that's a big mistake about bittul. People think that when you have bittul, it means that you become null. Because it's gold, self-nullification.
Right.
What we really mean is, you're nullifying, who are you nullifying? The lower self. The lower self is your identity as your animal soul. That's what you're nullifying. Why is it called an animal? Because that's a ni. How do you spell animal? A-N-I, right? Ani mal. It's the poor mal in French is sick. So it's the sick I. That's what an animal is.
You're mixing up languages.
Yeah, it's good. It doesn't matter. The point is what matters. The animal soul is an identity. The animal soul is not just a force in a person. That's what he says in the Tanya. Because the I in the Beinoni is the animal soul. Right? Remember that quote? That's what he says. So a Beinoni, a regular person, identifies with his animal soul, with his lower self. That's who he is. So when he says, I want, he's saying, my animal soul wants. When he says, I'm going, he says, my animal soul is going. Somebody like Hillel, when he says, I, he doesn't mean his animal soul. It means his divine soul.
Mm-hmm.
So, the way Rashi says it, because in the Rashi's time there was no yet distinction. You couldn't say animal soul and divine soul. So he said, Shekhinah. The Shekhinah is the divine soul as it comes to dwell down in a person. That's a correct explanation. He even explains it. Tanya explains it in chapter 26 of the epistles, of the Igros Kodesh. Shekhinah is Dvar Hashem. It's the word of Hashem in a person. That a person is able to speak, and he's speaking what Hashem told him to speak. And so that's the higher self. So he's saying here, when Hillel used to say, if I'm here, everything's here, He means if my higher self is here, meaning my divine soul is present, then everything is here. And if I'm not here, then who is here? And if my divine soul is not present in this simcha, so no one's here. No one here has a higher self. He was a Rebbe. Meaning that everybody was receiving from him. That's what he says. That's what he means. He poured from the jug of wisdom. Because wisdom is bittul. Wisdom is self-nullification. So Hillel was able to reach the level of his divine self through self-nullification, through wisdom. And because of it, it says, when I have that, everybody can have that. Can have the same thing. When I don't have it, im ein ani kan, if I'm not here, meaning my higher self is not here, no one, who else can have it? No one can have it. They all get it through me. Again, this is very Polish Chassidus. But he's not saying this because he's
Why
saying...
Shammai couldn't do it?
What?
Shammai also wasn't do it.
Shammai wasn't around yet, apparently. This is probably in the year, there were a few years that Hillel was alone. Right? Shammai was about 40 years old and Hillel was 80. How did he become his partner in debate? Because Hillel had an earlier partner, now I forget his name, also one word name. And he was his age, and they were the ones who debated. It was one of the Bnei Batera, it was one of the sons of Batera. I can't remember which one it was. And the Mishnah says that he was taken by the Malchus, meaning he received a position like a governor, something like that. And since he wanted to take care of the Yidden at that time, so he took the position and he left the Sanhedrin. And so for a while, Hillel didn't have anyone to debate with. And so he felt he was dying. Like when Reish Lakish, his partner, Rabbi Yochanan, passed away, he said he died soon afterwards because there's no purpose in life.
Right.
So it was probably in that time between when Hillel, but it also could be that Shammai, because he was so much younger, he didn't have that ability. He had the mind, but he didn't have yet the self-nullification. Okay, so we continue tomorrow this section. It's getting interesting, right?
But it is not getting interesting, it is interesting.
This is an amazing moment.